You open the fridge. Just stand there for a second. You're not hungry. You grab something anyway. Eat standing up. Quick. Like it doesn't count if you don't sit down. You close the door slowly. The house is quiet. Nothing crashes. Nothing calls you out. But something in you steps back. It's not about the food. It's about the fact that you said you wouldn't. You only break your own rules when no one's watching. And that's training something in you. Because the version of you who folds in the dark starts hesitating in the light. You think the world is pushing you around. It's smaller than that. You're getting easier to convince, even by yourself. If that hit, don't click away. You turn off the alarm. Not because you need more sleep, because you don't want to feel the weight of the decision you made last night. Your thumb hesitates for half a second before pressing snooze. That hesitation is not fatigue. It's negotiation. You lie there staring at the ceiling. You already know what you said you would do today. You also know you won't. Your jaw tightens. Your body stays still. 5 more minutes. You scroll without seeing. You tell yourself you deserve a softer start. You call it balance. The coffee tastes the same as yesterday. The promise doesn't. You sit at the table where you once wrote plans with intensity. Now you move the notebook aside to make space for something easier. Something smaller. You don't cancel the goal. You dilute it. You don't quit. You postpone. The strange thing is no one sees it. No one confronts you. No one calls you inconsistent. You look functional, responsible, even tired. Especially tired. That word protects you. Tired sounds human. Tired sounds forgivable. No one argues with tired. But deep down, you know something else happened. It wasn't exhaustion, it was permission. Permission to betray yourself quietly. You break rules only when no one is watching. You bend standards when there is no external consequence. You redefine discipline as flexibility. And each time you do it, something microscopic shifts. Your voice loses volume. Your decisions lose weight. Your internal command weakens. You don't lose dramatically, you erode. The most dangerous collapse is the one that feels reasonable. You tell yourself you will recover tomorrow. You tell yourself you work better under pressure. You tell yourself today is not the day, and the body listens, the mind records. Another concession stored. This is how authority dissolves, not through rebellion, through tolerance. You tolerate your own retreat. You tolerate the slight misalignment. You tolerate the gap between what you say and what you do. And the gap widens. You don't feel defeated. You feel slightly off, slightly behind, slightly less solid. You rub your face as if the friction could wake you. It's not sleep you're fighting, it's yourself. There is no villain in the room, no crisis, no external oppression. Just a quiet agreement you made with weakness. You think the world is hard. You think circumstances are heavy. But the truth is smaller, closer. You betrayed your own decision before breakfast, and you will call it a long day. By noon, you already feel behind. Not because the day attacked you, because you started it negotiating with yourself. There's a subtle heaviness in your shoulders. You interpret it as exhaustion. You label it burnout. But if you look closer, it isn't physical depletion. It's internal friction. Friction between the version of you that decided and the version of you that conceded. You say you're overwhelmed. But what overwhelms you isn't the task. It's the awareness that you're not leading yourself. You open your laptop. You answer the easy emails first. You reorganize folders. You tweak minor details that don't matter. Productive, harmless, acceptable, but not decisive. The important thing waits. You avoid looking directly at it. You tell yourself you need the right mood, the right energy, the right clarity. You've trained your mind to require comfort before commitment. That's not fatigue, that's conditioning. You postpone discomfort under the disguise of self-care. You've mastered the language of justification. I'm just not at my best today. I need to recharge. I'll do it properly tomorrow. Tomorrow has become your most loyal accomplice. Every small concession feels insignificant. You even congratulate yourself for being flexible. Flexible sounds wise. Rigid sounds unhealthy. So you bend. Again. And each time you bend your own rule, your internal authority shrinks. You don't notice it immediately. Authority doesn't collapse loudly. It weakens through repetition. When no one is watching, you lower the standard. When no one demands it, you withdraw effort. You behave differently under supervision than in solitude. That is the fracture. Because self-government is tested in private. Anyone can perform discipline publicly. Few sustain it alone. You say you're tired, but you still scroll for 40 minutes. You say you're drained, but you find energy for distraction. Your body is not empty. Your will is. There's a difference. Fatigue asks for rest. Weakness asks for escape, and you confuse the two. You sit back in your chair and sigh. You feel a faint irritation, not at the task, but at yourself. You don't articulate it. You just soften the edge of it. You smooth it over with a snack, with a message, with another minor adjustment. You are not collapsing, you are dissolving. You don't lose to the world, you lose to your own concession. Each time you retreat, you teach yourself something dangerous. That your word to yourself is negotiable. And once your word is negotiable, your identity becomes flexible. Not in strength, in structure. You begin to experience yourself as someone who almost does things, almost commits, almost follows through. You live in the almost, and the cost is invisible. No punishment arrives, no external authority intervenes. But something shifts internally. The next time you decide, your mind remembers the previous retreat. It whispers, "You didn't mean it last time." And slowly, without drama, you stop believing yourself. There is an economy operating inside you. Every time you lower a standard, you think you are saving energy. You think you are preserving yourself. You are not. You are trading authority for comfort, and comfort is expensive. The first concession feels harmless. It even feels intelligent. You tell yourself you are being strategic, that pushing today would be unnecessary pressure. But what you call strategy is often avoidance with better vocabulary. You don't abandon your goal. You renegotiate it downward, just slightly. You shrink the demand. You shorten the effort. You dilute the discipline. You say, "This is enough for now." Enough becomes less. Less becomes minimal. Minimal becomes default. This is how erosion works. Not through destruction, through adjustment. You adjust your expectations to match your weakest impulse, and then you call it realism. But realism that constantly protects your comfort is not realism. It is self-submission. There is a reason empires collapse slowly. Decay begins long before invasion. Internal tolerance is more dangerous than external pressure. You think your problem is motivation. It isn't. Motivation is a mood. Authority is a structure. You have been building moods instead of structure, and moods evaporate. Each time you say just this once, you create precedent. The mind records precedent faster than intention. Soon, your exceptions outnumber your rules, and when rules are outnumbered, they lose legitimacy. Inside you, there is a ruler and there is a crowd. The ruler speaks once, the crowd negotiates endlessly. If the ruler hesitates, the crowd takes over, and the crowd inside you prefers comfort. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote, "A prince who is not wise himself cannot be wisely advised." You think this is about politics. It isn't. If the authority inside you is weak, every impulse becomes an advisor. Hunger advises, mood advises, fear advises, distraction advises. And you listen, not because they are right, because your center is unstable. You believe you are being kind to yourself. But what you are actually doing is lowering the internal cost of retreat. You are making betrayal affordable. The cheaper it becomes to break your word, the more frequently you will do it. And here is the hidden tax. Each concession does not only change behavior, it reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who commands. You start seeing yourself as someone who negotiates with appetite, negotiates with delay, negotiates with fear. You don't lose dramatically. You become flexible in the wrong direction. Power does not disappear at once. It leaks, one tolerated weakness at a time, and you tolerate more than you admit. Because facing it would require something sharper than comfort. It would require governance. You think this is internal. It isn't. The moment your self-command weakens, the environment adjusts. Not dramatically, subtly. People start testing the edges of you. A colleague interrupts you mid-sentence, you let it pass. A friend cancels plans last minute, you say, no worries. There are worries. Someone adds extra work to your plate, you hesitate, then accept. You tell yourself you're being mature, but something inside tightens. You go home carrying conversations you didn't finish, words you swallowed, boundaries you softened. You stand in front of the mirror at night. Your face looks composed, your chest does not. Here is the first scene. You're at the table. You said you would stop eating after dinner, no one is there. You open the fridge, you pause, you close it, you open it again, you eat standing up. Quick, quiet, not hungry. When you close the fridge, nothing explodes. The house stays silent. But something inside you lowers its voice. Cut. This is not about food. It's about authority without witnesses. The world reads signals you don't notice. When you hesitate with yourself, you hesitate with others. When you bend privately, you bend publicly. You think people don't see it. They don't consciously, but they feel it. Authority is not declared, it is sensed. When you are aligned, your no is clean. When you are fractured, your no trembles. And trembling invites pressure. Second scene. You're in a meeting. You prepared an idea, you know it's solid. Someone challenges it casually, not aggressively, just lightly. You feel the old doubt rise. Instead of holding the ground, you soften the proposal. Maybe it's not the best approach. The room moves on. Your idea disappears without resistance. Cut. The cost is not the lost idea, it is the reinforcement of internal retreat. Each external concession mirrors an internal one. You don't need enemies when your governance is unstable. The world does not conquer you. It occupies the space you leave unattended. If you cannot hold a boundary with yourself, why would you hold one with anyone else? This is how submission spreads, not by force, by habit. And habit does not argue, it accumulates. You begin to feel slightly smaller in rooms, slightly less decisive in tone. You attribute it to mood, to stress. But it is structural. He who cannot govern himself will be governed. And governance does not always look like chains. Sometimes it looks like agreement. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like you smiling while stepping back from your own ground. You have learned to disguise retreat as virtue. You call it flexibility, you call it empathy, you call it emotional intelligence. But sometimes it is fear wearing polished language. You don't confront, you understand. You don't enforce limits, you adapt. You don't insist, you flow. And every time you choose softness over structure, you tell yourself you are evolving. But evolution that erodes your center is not growth. It is accommodation. There is a version of maturity that is nothing more than silent surrender. You convince yourself that strong people don't need to prove anything, that disciplined people are not rigid, that controlled people are not intense. So you reduce intensity, you blur standards, you become easier to deal with and harder to respect. Third scene. You promised yourself you would wake up early to train. The alarm rings. You sit up, you actually could go, but then the voice comes, rest is important. You lie back down. You don't feel weak, you feel reasonable. When you wake later, you tell yourself, balance matters. Cut. Balance without backbone becomes drift. You have built an identity around being understanding, around being calm, around not being extreme. But there is a difference between stability and passivity. You avoid extremes so much that you avoid commitment. Commitment requires exclusion. It requires saying no, it requires tension, and tension makes you uncomfortable. So you redefine discipline as obsession. You redefine consistency as rigidity. You redefine self-command as harshness. You shrink the sharp edges of your own standards. Virtue becomes camouflage. You say you are protecting your peace, but sometimes you are protecting your comfort. Peace and comfort are not the same. Peace can coexist with pressure, comfort avoids it. When you consistently choose comfort, you slowly lose the ability to tolerate discomfort at all. And without tolerance for discomfort, there is no authority. You become dependent on good conditions to function. Good mood, good weather, good feedback. Remove those, and you hesitate. A governed person waits for conditions. A governing person creates structure despite them. You think being gentle with yourself is self-love. Sometimes it is self-indulgence. And indulgence has a cost. You start to sense it, a faint disappointment, a quiet dissatisfaction. Not because life is unfair, because you are not fully showing up. The world is not too heavy. Your standards are too negotiable. And the more negotiable they become, the more you lose something invisible but vital, your own respect. You have learned to disguise retreat as virtue. You call it flexibility. You call it empathy. You call it emotional intelligence. But sometimes it is fear wearing polished language. You don't confront. You understand. You don't enforce limits. You adapt. You don't insist. You flow. And every time you choose softness over structure, you tell yourself you are evolving. But evolution that erodes your center is not growth. It is accommodation. There is a version of maturity that is nothing more than silent surrender. You convince yourself that strong people don't need to prove anything, that disciplined people are not rigid, that controlled people are not intense. So you reduce intensity, you blur standards, you become easier to deal with and harder to respect. Third scene. You promised yourself you would wake up early to train. The alarm rings. You sit up. You actually could go. But then the voice comes. Rest is important. You lie back down. You don't feel weak. You feel reasonable. When you wake later, you tell yourself balance matters. Cut. Balance without backbone becomes drift. You have built an identity around being understanding, around being calm, around not being extreme. But there is a difference between stability and passivity. You avoid extremes so much that you avoid commitment. Commitment requires exclusion. It requires saying no, it requires tension, and tension makes you uncomfortable. So you redefine discipline as obsession. You redefine consistency as rigidity. You redefine self-command as harshness. You shrink the sharp edges of your own standards. Virtue becomes camouflage. You say you are protecting your peace. But sometimes you are protecting your comfort. Peace and comfort are not the same. Peace can coexist with pressure. Comfort avoids it. When you consistently choose comfort, you slowly lose the ability to tolerate discomfort at all. And without tolerance for discomfort, there is no authority. You become dependent on good conditions to function. Good mood, good weather, good feedback. Remove those and you hesitate. A governed person waits for conditions. A governing person creates structure despite them. You think being gentle with yourself is self-love. Sometimes it is self-indulgence. And indulgence has a cost. You start to sense it, a faint disappointment, a quiet dissatisfaction. Not because life is unfair, because you are not fully showing up. The world is not too heavy. Your standards are too negotiable, and the more negotiable they become, the more you lose something invisible but vital. Your own respect. At some point, this stops being about productivity. It becomes political, not outside. Inside, there is a territory called you. There are impulses, fears, appetites, excuses, and there is command. If command is weak, impulses rule. You think you are choosing freely. But most days, you are reacting to mood, reacting to discomfort, reacting to resistance. That is not freedom. That is internal democracy without leadership. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." Applied inward, this becomes uncomfortable. If your impulses do not respect your word, they will not obey it. You have tried to motivate yourself gently. You have tried to inspire yourself kindly. But you have rarely required yourself firmly. You negotiate with weakness as if it deserves equal vote. It doesn't. Weakness does not need hatred. It needs governance. Self-government is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is deciding that your long-term authority matters more than your short-term comfort. Right now, your impulses feel safe. They know you will bend. They know you will soften. They know you will postpone. You have trained them. Every concession was instruction. You taught your mind that resistance wins. Now resistance appears earlier, stronger, more convincing, and you call it personality. It is conditioning. Here is the turning point. You are not tired. You are undisciplined. That sentence irritates you. Good. Irritation means the illusion is cracking. If this tension exposes something you have been avoiding, stay. Not for inspiration, for confrontation. Because the cost of continuing as you are is not dramatic. It is gradual. Gradual erosion of self-trust, gradual erosion of internal authority. If this resonates and disturbs you, remain, not to feel better, to feel sharper. The problem is not that you lack potential, it is that you lack enforcement. You expect results without structure, respect without consistency, confidence without command. Self-submission feels easier. You wait for better conditions. You wait for better mood. You wait for pressure to force you. That is not governance. That is dependency. He who cannot govern himself will be governed by distraction, by appetite, by other people's agendas. And the world does not need to overpower you. It only needs you to hesitate. The moment you hesitate internally, you authorize external pressure. Self-government is silent. It is the decision made at 6 a.m. and executed at 6:01. No applause, no negotiation, just alignment. The question is no longer whether you are capable. The question is whether you are willing to rule yourself. Delay feels harmless. You tell yourself you are waiting for clarity, for the right moment, for better alignment. But delay is rarely neutral. It accumulates interest. Every postponed decision increases internal noise. You wake up with unfinished intentions already sitting on your chest. Not dramatic, just heavy. You start to experience a subtle split. There is what you say you want, and there is what you repeatedly do. The distance between them widens, and distance erodes belief. You no longer doubt your capacity, you doubt your follow-through. That doubt is expensive. Because confidence is not built by thinking well of yourself. It is built by observing yourself execute. When execution disappears, confidence becomes performance. You talk well, you plan well, you understand deeply, but you do not enforce consistently. Fourth scene, you are alone at night. You open the document you've been postponing. You stare at the first paragraph. You could begin. Instead, you check a message, then another. You close the document. You tell yourself you will start fresh tomorrow morning. You sleep. The next morning, you avoid opening it at all. Cut. This is not laziness. It is the slow training of self-distrust. Every time you delay, you rehearse avoidance. And rehearsal builds identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who circles effort. You don't crash. You orbit. Orbiting feels active. It is not. It is controlled distance from discomfort. The longer you orbit, the harder re-entry becomes. Resistance thickens. Excuses sharpen. You say you are overwhelmed, but you are simply untrained in staying. Staying when it is boring. Staying when it is repetitive. Staying when it is unclear. Authority is built in monotony, not in bursts. You have confused intensity with consistency. Intensity feels powerful. Consistency feels ordinary. But power lives in the ordinary. The price of delay is not immediate failure. It is internal corrosion. You stop believing that you will do what you say. And once belief fades, identity weakens. You start needing external pressure to move. Deadlines, consequences, fear. Without them, you stall. That is governance outsourced. You become dependent on urgency. You tell yourself you perform better under pressure. No, you only perform when cornered. And living cornered is not strength, it is survival mode. Survival mode cannot build authority. It can only react. The longer you postpone self-command, the more foreign discipline feels, until one day structure itself feels oppressive, and you resist it. Not because it is wrong, because you are no longer used to leading yourself. That is the real cost. Not lost time, lost authority. And authority, once repeatedly abandoned, does not return easily. At this point, you have a choice. Not about goals, not about productivity, about identity, because this is not a habit issue, it is an identity exchange. Right now, you are someone who negotiates with yourself. You soften standards, you reinterpret retreat, you survive through adjustment. It feels safe. But safety built on concession shrinks you. There is another version of you. Not louder, not more aggressive, just aligned. This version does not debate every impulse. It does not dramatize discipline. It does not wait for emotional permission. It acts, not perfectly, but consistently. The difference between who you are and who you could be is not talent, it is governance. To become that version, something must be lost. Not comfort. Illusion. The illusion that you are tired when you are undisciplined. The illusion that flexibility is always wisdom. The illusion that delay is harmless. You cannot carry both identities. You either remain someone who negotiates with weakness, or you become someone who commands despite it. There is a cost. When you stop conceding, people may notice. You will say no more clearly. You will withdraw from distractions more firmly. You will choose structure over ease. Some will call it intensity, some will call it change. It is neither. It is consolidation. Consolidation of authority. This is where most retreat. Because the moment you enforce yourself, you lose the excuse of potential. If you fail now, it is not because you were tired, it is because you chose. That level of responsibility is heavier, but it is clean, and clean weight builds strength. There is a line from Machiavelli that cuts deeper than it seems. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. You have lived like that internally. You made promises at night. You broke them in the morning. Past necessity. Present convenience. If you want authority, that pattern must end. Not dramatically, daily, quietly. You will not feel inspired. You will feel decided. And that decision will feel unfamiliar at first. Because you are changing governments within yourself. This is not about becoming harder. It is about becoming coherent. If something in you refuses comfort right now, follow it. Not because it feels good, because it feels true. There is a book called The Forgotten Agreement by Luciana Santos. Not as salvation, as confrontation. Sometimes what you call growth is only avoidance with elegant language. You will find a reference in the pinned comment. The question now is simple and unforgiving. Are you willing to lose the identity that negotiates in order to become the one that governs? If you answer silently, answer honestly, and write it.